Hello again, and here is yet another mishmash of various spoopa topics, etc. I named this thread the Spoopa Potluck thanks to something someone mentioned in a previous thread and I thought it was appropriate. Also, if anyone has any stories, info, whatever, and you wish to contribute, go right ahead, the more the scarier. And with that, let's get the ball rolling on this one. Name, Nulaciphalea. Tribal affiliation, Choctaw. Alternate spellings, Nalaciphalea. Pronunciation, Nalaciphalaya. Type, ghost being. Nulaciphalea is a frightening creature of Choctaw mythology. Its name literally means long black being, and though it is usually described as a tall spindly humanoid, it is sometimes said to slither like a snake or melt into the form of a shadow. It lurks in the long shadows around dusk, frightening children from staying out too late and occasionally bewitching incautious hunters. The Nulaciphalea is a character in the folklore of the Choctaw tribe of North America. This fearsome being is said to have the appearance of a shriveled human being with an uncharacteristically long nose and pointed ears. Native hunters believed the Nulaciphalea to attack at twilight and bewitch them with its evil magic. It would first attract the hunter's attention by calling out to him. Then, when the hunter turned, he was so affected by its power that he fell helpless to the ground. While its victim was unable to fight back, the Nulaciphalea would insert a thorn in him. The Choctaw believed this led the person to unwittingly perform evil acts against others. According to the legends, people wouldn't remember being pricked by the thorn, they would only realize it after they started performing evil. The legends also say that this demon could breed, and its children would remove their entrails at night and walk around the woods where they lived, carrying them in their hands. The stories also claim that the Nulaciphalaea's children had a luminous appearance and showed up near swamps, a possible mythological explanation for the will-o-wisp phenomenon. The Peluda appeared in the Middle Ages in the River Huisne in France and was so large and powerful that it caused flooding and destroyed farms just by entering a nearby river. This beast was a gigantic dragon-like creature, but instead of being covered entirely in scales, it had green fur on its torso and a tuft of sharp quills on its back. Like most dragons, the Peluda was capable of breathing fire, had large claws, and was notorious for causing trouble. The tales claim that this horrible abomination declined to enter Noah's Ark, but somehow ended up in France in the Middle Ages, still alive and killing. The dragon terrorized the countryside and, as dragons tend to do, ate a lot of people. One particular local took exception to the dragon's eating habits, especially when its latest snack had been a woman he was engaged to. When he learned that its weakest point was its tail, he decided that he had to fight the beast. Armed with this knowledge, he defeated the dragon once and for all. One of the most disturbing beings of all hails from Malaysia and is a relatively young legend. In Malaysian lore, a hantu is demonic spirit. According to one particular legend, a hantu was born from black magic back in the 1960s and quickly spread a panic. This murderous ghost was born of a horrible demonic ritual. A man wanted to have all of his worldly desires met, but he didn't want to put forth much effort, so he made a deal with Satan. He would be given everything he wanted, but in order to fulfill his part of the bargain, he had to rape 21 virgins in 7 days. According to the stories, he succeeded in his horrible crime, as the orang minyak was soon birthed. The modus operandi of the orang minyak, which means oily man, and reflects his appearance, was to rape women. Rumors spread quickly. It was alleged that if a woman wasn't a virgin, the orang minyak was invisible to her. He could also keep his victims from speaking and moving with his demonic powers. During the hysteria, women would try to camouflage themselves as men while asleep to avoid his gaze, and it was believed that biting their own left thumbs would ward him away if he attacked. The tales from the abandoned monastery on the hill. History tells us that the St. Augustinian Academy, located in the Grimes Hill section of Staten Island, New York, was once a boys' high school that closed in the mid-60s, and later became a religious retreat, which was abandoned in 1985. Wagner College, which is adjacent to the school, now owns the property and is thinking of using it for student housing. Our readers, however, tell much different tales about what once went on at, and under the deserted old parochial school. Better known in area lore simply as the Monastery, the school has been the inspiration for countless chilling tales and the chosen destination of a generation of late-night thrill-seeking adventurers. Now surrounded by neighborhoods of suburban houses with manicured lawns, the all-but-forgotten fortress is shrouded by a tangle of overgrown weeds, vines, and gnarly trees. Turkey vultures circle lazily overhead, occasionally landing to roost on the monastery's crumbling bell tower, where they keep a watchful eye over the long-dead institution. Abandoned Monastery Road Trip. Although I live in New Jersey, I have made many trips to New York, mostly Staten Island, and in my travels I have heard of an abandoned monastery there. One Saturday my friends and I all piled into 3 cars and headed out to this abandoned monastery. We drove up this winding road through this quaint neighborhood, and in the middle of it, on a secluded hill surrounded by trees, stood this huge church-like building. We walked up in front of the monastery and the door was wide open. We put a piece of wood in front of the door so it wouldn't close. It was very scary. There were long staircases and many basement and sub-levels. Walking up the main staircase there was a lot of graffiti and Satan signs. The building also has no roof, which makes it like a scary movie. In the back is a fountain shaped like a cross, and there are many stories of Satan worshippers gathering there. It is a very scary and interesting place, and I am sure it has a story behind it. Spooky Staten Island Monastery. I live in New Jersey, but I know a good place to go to. It's in Staten Island, New York. It's an abandoned monastery in a dark forest. It's so scary and big. There are 3 floors and the basement goes down at least 10 floors underground. Rumors are there are dead bodies down there, which is probably true because there's the worst smell in the world down there. But no one dares to go down to the lower levels below the basement. While you're there you hear footprints behind you, people talking, and some people even see ghosts. It's really spooky. 10 stories beneath the old monastery. I don't live in Staten Island, but I went there one time with my friends. People told me about an old abandoned monastery about 15 minutes away from the bridge. I live in Bayonne, New Jersey, about 5 minutes from there. The story about the monastery goes like this: about 60 years ago a bunch of monks lived there in solitude and silence. But there was one monk that went crazy and went on a killing spree, massacring all the other monks and dragging their bodies down to a secret sublevel. The monks slept in sublevels underground. People say they go down 30 floors, and mutilated their bodies. People say if you want to see the monks' ghosts you have to go down to the last sublevel at night. So we wanted something to do on a summer night like any normal teenagers, but this night changed our lives forever. We went down the road to the monastery and went around it exploring the outside, too scared to go in just yet. There were a lot of satanic signs and gang graffiti. Finally we got the balls to go in, but it was so dark inside that if we shut our lights off we couldn't see our hands in front of our faces. The building consists of 3 floors, 2 wings, and whatever is below. We went upstairs first. It was dark and creepy, but there had to be at least 30 rooms on each floor. We saw that the roof had caved in and there were holes in the floor that dropped down 2 floors. There were also bloody animals wrapped in cloth hung from the ceiling. It was creepy. We were all scared and really didn't want to go on, but every now and then we heard the sounds of chains dragging and a banging and the opening of a door behind us. No one was saying anything, but I knew I wasn't the only one that heard it. Next we found stairs going down, so we proceeded that way. There was a kid with us that kept pushing us to go on further. He was leading us, so we followed him down 3 flights of stairs to the sublevels. The stairs were wooden and shaky as we were walking down. At about the 3rd sublevel we found the monks' quarters. They were very small and cramped. The strange thing about the rooms was the walls had all scratch marks down them that looked like fingernails were embedded in them. Then we came to a room blocked by wood. Behind the door were small stairs that looked like they went on forever. We followed the stairs down about 10 floors, and they were really starting to shake now. We entered a room where there were what looked like jail cells. It was getting a little too scary, so we left. Getting subterranean at the monastery. I was recently reminded of the stories my Staten Island native friends used to tell about the abandoned monastery. As soon as you see the place, you can tell it was the home of some kind of religious group. There have been rumors of Satan worshippers meeting in the monastery, but they are not the only ones that have been there. For years, kids have been going up to the monastery near Wagner College, throwing up graffiti and partying, but not too many have been to the sublevels. A short walk around the building will reveal an out-of-commission fountain, which seems to be in the shape of a cross, but now is chipped and the home of dozens of weeds for years. Naturally, an abandoned building in Staten Island has tons of graffiti on the higher levels, but as you travel lower and lower under the surface, signs of life become less and less evident. The underground hallways are a maze that travels God only knows how low beneath the surface. On one trip investigating a flooded 7th level below the surface, we found a giant stone in the middle of a room where the ceiling was not at all caved in and neither were the walls. In the same room we found candles and something that made the hairs stand on the back of my neck. Marks on one of the ancient wooden doors as if it were locked from the outside side and someone had tried to claw their way out of the room. What happened in the ancient abandoned monastery? I have heard many stories, but I only know one thing for sure. If you make your way to the last underground chamber, all your questions will be answered. The monastic life. I was a postulant at Augustinian Academy from fall of 1964 through spring 1965. This is the same building you know as the Staten Island Monastery. I have the yearbook and of course recognized the monastery right off. In 1966, the postulants were moved to Melbourne Prep in PA and the school was shut down. It was indeed a strange place. I felt I was being taken over by evil spirits before I ever heard the word possession. I was 15 years old at the time and I kept requesting from the Father Prior that I leave, but he would not notify my family. In those days incoming and outgoing mail was censored, and there was little means to send a message home that was not intercepted. Many fathers and brothers laughed at my strange behavior as I was well into a mental breakdown, which to this day I have not completely recovered from. Back in the 60s the popularity of minor seminaries was declining, although there were several seminaries in New York at the time. Somewhere close by was a Franciscan minor seminary. Augustinians were friendly with Franciscans, we despised Jesuits and nuns. Ted Bergeron. You can read more the St. Augustinian Monastery and all of New York's other legendary abandoned places in our book Weird New York. I actually recommend the entire series in the Weird US line of books, they are perfect for reading on a rainy night. The tragic tale of the clawfoot people of Zoar Valley. Zoar Valley is a small area near Gowanda, New York. Its history has long been associated with tales of the strange and bizarre. Perhaps the strangest tale of all to come out of Zoar Valley is that of the clawfoot people. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many of the inhabitants of Zoar Valley were all descendants of the same woman, an English prostitute who had settled the area in the early 1800s. There were over 200 relatives of this prostitute living in the area. And all were known for their strange appearance. These were the clawfoot people. Due to exposure to syphilis, the prostitute was said to have passed on a genetic abnormality to all her male offspring that caused their hands and feet to be deformed into claw-like extremities. As the family grew and the abnormality appeared among more and more of the town's residents, the clawfoot people became legendary in the area. They were shunned, social outcasts who became pariahs among outsiders. This had severe psychological effects on members of the family. One man, in a fit of desperation, used an axe to remove his own fused fingers. Another well-remembered tale tells of a man who was miraculously not struck with the condition. He lived a normal life and married, and chose not to tell his wife that he was a member of the infamous clan of clawfoot people. Their first son was born and was struck with the affliction. The wife abandoned both husband and child. The curse of the clawfoot people had struck again. In the 1920s, the clawfoot people took action in one of the most tragic scenarios imaginable. Every member of the family got together, male and female, and a secret pact was made. No member of the clawfoot people would marry or have children in an effort to stop the grotesque deformity from being passed on. In other words, the clawfoot people chose to exterminate themselves. The clawfoot people held true to their pact. One by one, they grew old and died off. Today, no member of their tragically afflicted lineage remains alive. What is today a condition easily corrected by surgery caused this entire family to live as outcasts to eventually choose mass death over continued life. Loveland's frogman. In March of 1972, on two separate occasions, two Ohio policemen saw what has become known as the Loveland frogman. Fortean investigators Ron Schaffner and Richard Mackey, who interviewed the officers, investigated the incidents. The first incident took place at 1 a.m. on March 3, 1972 on a clear, cold night. Officer Ray Shockey was en route to Loveland, via Riverside Road, when he thought he saw a dog beside the roadway, in a field on Twitewee Road. But then the thing stood up, its eyes illuminated by the car lights, looked at him for an instant, turned, and leapt over a guardrail. Shockey saw it go down an embankment and into the Little Miami River. He described the thing as weighing about 60 pounds, standing about 3 to 4 feet tall, and having a textured, leathery skin and a face like a frog or lizard. Shockey drove to the police station and returned with Officer Mark Matthews to look for evidence of the creature. They turned up scrape marks leading down the side of the small hill near the river. On St. Patrick's Day, March 17, 1972, Officer Matthews was driving outside of Loveland when he had a similar experience. Seeing an animal lying in the middle of the road, he stopped to remove what he thought was a dead critter. Instead, when the officer opened his squeaky car door, the animal got up into a crouched position like a football player. The creature hobbled to the guardrail and lifted its leg over the fence, keeping an eye on Matthews the whole time. Perhaps it was the funny smirk on its face, but Matthews decided to shoot it. He missed, however, probably because the thing didn't slow down. Matthews later told how he felt the creature stood more upright than the way Shockey had described it. One area farmer told investigators he saw a large, frog-like, or lizard-like creature during the same month of the officer's sightings. The reports of the 1972 frogman had been hard on the witnesses. Those two officers took a lot of flack about the sighting back then, said a local businessman who wished not to be identified in a 1985 newspaper story about the sightings. People made fun of them and the city. Years later, in 1999, during local media interviews, Mark Matthews explained that he was tired of talking about the frogman, and that what he had seen was an iguana. But at the time, both witnesses definitely saw something like an upright man-like lizard about 4 feet tall. And then there is the matter of the sketch. Officer Shockey's sister drew it for them shortly after their experience with the creature, and it clearly looks like a giant frogman, a bipedal creature. During 2001, Weird Ohio did a follow-up investigation, re-interviewing principals, including asking Ron Schaffner about Matthews' attempts to pull back from his original story. Schaffner told us, "Why, after all these years is Matthews debunking the story? I'm not sure. Could be a number of reasons. But both officers told us that it resembled the sketch in 1976. Why would they show us a composite drawing of this creature back in 1976 and tell us that it looked like the drawing? I lived in Loveland for about 5 years and the story is still circulating with many variations. Just maybe Matthews is tired of hearing the story and all the variations. Not sure if this is a repost or not. I am not sure if I posted already about the Loveland frog creature. If I did, sorry." Wednesday, June 23, 2004. I've heard of them, but have never seen a real, honest-to-goodness Texas ghost light. This whole ghost light concept has always seemed a little bit out near the edge of reality for me, although I certainly trust a couple people who claim to have seen them in the Big Thickets famous Bragg Road area. My wife Sharon and I were returning this past Monday afternoon from visiting relatives near Texas' Toledo Bend Reservoir that separates Texas and Louisiana. Sabina National Forest surrounds Toledo Bend, which lies in the heart of Sabina County, which itself is near the Big Thickets' north edge. Sabina's dense forests and randomly scattered swamps are loaded with wild pigs, deer, cougars, snakes, alligators, coyotes, old graveyards, ancient Indian mounds, Cherokee Indian descendants, retired folks, missing astronauts, and who knows who or what else. Toledo Bend's biggest town, Hemp Hill, population 1036, was the focal point of our recent space shuttle disaster's main crash site. Texas Highway 87 goes north and south, directly through this little, old-fashioned East Texas town. Around 4 p.m. Monday, Sharon and I left Toledo Bend heading north on Highway 87, turning west just before Hemp Hill. We were about 5 miles down 201 on our way to Jasper when suddenly out of nowhere a bright ball of light, perhaps a soccer ball size, came barreling and flashing down the highway straight towards us at a very high rate of speed. It was moving so fast it appeared visually to be leaving a trail of light behind it. It streaked right over our hood and windshield, swerved up a bit, probably 20 feet above us, and headed off down the highway somewhere behind us. The ball of light's brightness hurt my eyes, and even days later when I think about it, it still gives me a slight frontal lobe headache. I looked over at Sharon and said, "Did you see that?" She answered, "You saw it too? The streak of light? Weird, wasn't it? I'm glad you saw it, because I thought I must be crazy. There was no way it could be an airplane or jet or anything else that could move so fast and so low, maybe a few hundred miles per second. Seriously, it was quick." Then she laughed nervously and said, "Maybe it was a UFO, a little one." I'm an engineer, physicist, and mathematician who has held high government security clearances, and Sharon is a practical-minded bookkeeper. We are both pragmatic, sensible people. Do I have a scientist's explanation for this high-speed ball of bright light? No, I really don't. My first thoughts were of a daylight meteor or shooting star, but I rejected this concept because of its flat trajectory coming straight down the highway until it intelligently swerved acrobatically up and over our car. Secondly, it could have been a hovering light we approached and passed under, because traveling at 70 miles per hour is moving about 100 feet per second. The only problem with this concept is the closing speed was much greater than 100 feet per second, and Sharon and I both saw a streaking trail of light behind the zooming light ball as we approached it on our collision course. Further, a hovering ball of light in broad daylight could pose as many questions as a streaking one. No, the light ball and our car were both independently moving objects, with the light ball traveling much faster than our car. When it passed over us, it zipped by as fast as a bolt of lightning on a hot summer afternoon. The whole event was over in a few split seconds. I never stopped, and I could not spot the streaking ball of light out of my rear view mirror as I headed on down Highway 201 towards Jasper. In fact, if the truth were known, I stepped on it a bit to get the heck out of there. I don't know if the light had anything to do with ghosts, but I know for sure I've finally encountered what so many people call a Texas ghost light. Tom Dillman. Weird Texas. This should be amusing. Axe attacks on Pig Lady Road. Pig Lady Road, Hillsborough, Somerset County, New Jersey. Word has it there were some murders back there a while ago, and some pig lady roams the area and can be summoned by driving down the road, turning the car off, flashing the lights 3 times, screaming "Pig Lady," and looking in your rear view mirror. Eric W. The Pig Lady's glowing head. Have you ever heard about the Pig Lady? This is all I know. A husband came home from work and decapitated his wife. When the police got there, they never found her missing head. Now you are supposed to go down this road off of Roycefield Road in Hillsborough, Doris Duke's property, that is roped off, and honk your horn at night and her glowing head appears. John R. The pig lady's pig head. Supposedly when she was born she was so ugly and grotesque her father chopped off a pig's head and put it on her. Now she suffers like this for eternity and tries to steal your head if you go down her road. Anonymous. Disfigured by fire, pig lady flees to woods. The old story I remember was that you're supposed to go down Pig Lady Road at night and find a red tree at the side of the road. You'd do something and the pig lady is supposed to come out chasing you. Now, the pig lady was supposed to be an old maid of the Duke's who was injured during a fire at the mansion. A fire broke out, and this woman was on the second floor and was abandoned by everyone else as they saved themselves. She fell from the second floor, disfiguring her face, and she disappeared to live in the woods on the Duke estate. Vinny. Cries of the Pig Lady. It is said that if you drive down Pig Lady Road at midnight, she will jump out in front of your car making loud weeping noises. She weeps in shame of her disfigured face and therefore only comes out at night. Along Pig Lady Road, there are also stone walls. If you walk up to one of these walls and throw a penny backwards into a well, you could see her reflection in the water standing behind your back as you are looking down into the well. Andrea R. The mysterious pig lady attacks. The story goes that in the early 1900s when Hillsborough was all farms and vast woods there lived a lady who resembled a pig. She lived on a farm secluded from civilization because as a child she was picked on and teased constantly, so she vowed never to have to deal with that kind of torture ever again. One day as she was gardening, a young boy came along with two of his friends and noticed the pig lady gardening. The boys made jokes about her hideous pig face and vowed to go back later that night, and place a slaughtered pig head on her doorstep. They went that night and were never heard from again. Years later as Hillsborough grew in population, the missing teenager's bones were found where her garden once was. Legend has it that in order for her to come out, you must annoy her by flashing your lights, screaming pig lady, and beeping the horn. Then you must leave someone from the group on the street, and drive off without looking back. Once you get to the end of the road you turn around and go back and see what your friend has witnessed. The whole drive from leaving your friend and coming back takes 10 minutes. We all admitted to being scared except for my friend Jen. She was calling us stupid for being scared and taunted the pig lady when she got out of the car. We did the routine and sped off. We arrived back and laughing at how scared we all were, except there was no Jen. We thought she was playing a joke, so we got out of the car. My friend Shannon heard crying from a nearby bush. My friend John carried Jen out and we got into the car in silence. After leaving the deserted road we stopped to get gas. Jen was still crying and I turned to comfort her. That's when I noticed the scratches on her face, arms, and legs. We dropped her off and she never spoke to us again. She moved 1 year later. Read The True History of the Pig Lady in Weird New Jersey, Volume I. This internet story is only a small excerpt of the information we have published on this subject. For the full story we suggest you refer to past issues of Weird New Jersey magazine. To keep up to date on this story and all the other weird goings on in the state, subscribe to Weird New Jersey and we'll deliver it to your door. If your local bookseller, newsstand, or convenience store doesn't carry Weird New Jersey, just tell them to call us toll-free at 1-866-WEIRD-NEW-JERSEY and we'll be happy to stock your favorite store for you. This entry was posted in Roads Less Traveled, Stories and tagged Axe Attack, Doris Duke, Hillsborough, Pig Lady, Pig Woman, Roycefield Road. Bookmark the permalink. The Sandy Hook Sea Serpent. The North Shrewsbury, Navesink, River is one of the most scenic estuaries on the eastern coast of America. Known for luxury yachts, stately homes, and ice boating, it is hardly the place you would expect to find the legend of a sea serpent. But, in the late 19th century it was the location of one of many well-documented and unexplained sightings of mysterious sea creatures that plagued the waters of the North Atlantic. The creature in question was seen by several people, all who were familiar with local sea life. While returning from a day-long outing, Marcus P. Sherman, Lloyd Eglinton, Stephen Allen, and William Tinton, all of Red Bank, encountered the monster. The Red Bank Register reported the witnesses to be sober and respectable local merchants. At around 10 p.m. the yacht Tilly S., owned by Sherman, was making its way back to Red Bank after a picnic at Highlands Beach. The men had enjoyed a pleasant Sunday evening escaping the warm early summer weather. The moon was shining bright, providing for high visibility as the yacht cut through the water. A stiff summer breeze was blowing and they rounded the highlands and headed toward Red Bank. At the tiller of the Tilly S., Marcus Sherman steered through the familiar waters. At the bow was Lloyd Eglinton, who kept watch for debris in the water ahead. Artist's rendition of the mysterious sea creature as it appeared in the December 1887 edition of Scientific American. Suddenly Eglinton yelled that there was something in the water dead ahead. Sherman steered hard to port to avoid the collision. As they looked to see what the obstacle was, they were shocked. There ahead of them was the Sandy Hook sea serpent that had been sighted many times over the preceding 2 years. So credible were the sightings of the serpent 2 years earlier, that Scientific American had run an article issuing an opinion that the monster was in fact a giant squid. The article, complete with drawings, appeared in the December 27, 1887, edition of the prestigious scientific periodical. The earlier sighting at Sandy Hook had been made by several credible witnesses. Most notably the members of the Sandy Hook Life-Saving Service. The crew members had sighted a large monster in the cold waters just off Sandy Hook in November 1879. The sighting was so credible that scientists were dispatched to take statements. It is from these descriptive statements that it was determined the Sandy Hook sea monster was, in fact, a giant squid. For the next several years there were reports of all types of sea serpent sightings up and down the East Atlantic coast. What the Red Bank men saw was surely no giant squid. It was described as about 50 foot long and serpentine in shape. It swam with snake-like undulation slowly and steadily through the water. As it passed halfway past the bow, its head rose from the water giving forth a mighty roar. The head was described as small and somewhat resembling a bulldog's in shape. It had 2 short rounded horns on its head just above its eyes. The eyes were said to be the size of silver dollars. Bristles adorned the upper lip of the monster, much like those that would be found on a cat. The beast's nostrils were quite large and flattened. The serpent-like body tapered to a sword-like pointed tail. The frightened men stared in disbelief as it slowly and leisurely swam toward the shore of Hartshorn's Cove. As the monster disappeared into the night, the men made their way back to Red Bank with a monster of a story to tell. The men of the Tilly S were not the only ones to see the creature. Other boaters on the water saw the serpent and gave near identical descriptions. In all over a dozen boaters had seen the strange creature on his nocturnal swim. Over the next months and years there would be other sightings of the monster in the Navasink. In time it came to be known as the Shrewsbury Sea Serpent. No scientific explanation was ever given for the sightings, as had been done for the so-called Sandy Hook Sea Serpent, however the description is not totally without merit. Other than the size, the description is very similar to that of the oarfish. In any case the mystery remains as to the true identity and fate of the sea serpent. The preceding article by Robert Heyer is featured in issue number 43 Weird New Jersey magazine. Legends of the Blue Hole. One of the most storied sites in all of southern New Jersey is a mysterious body of water known as the Blue Hole. Located deep in the Pine Barrens of Winslow, on the border of Camden and Gloucester counties, this small but legendary pool is said to not only be bottomless, but also a frequent pit stop of the Jersey Devil. Though its icy blue-tinged water might seem inviting, especially on a hot summer day, locals warn their children to stay away from the Blue Hole and to never go swimming there. Tales of unexplained whirlpools which suck down hapless swimmers have long been part of the hole's lore. Some who have been lucky enough to escape its clutches have claimed that they actually felt something, perhaps the Jersey Devil himself, pulling them down into the chilly depths. The bottom of the Blue Hole, if indeed there is a bottom, is said to be made of a fine sand, sometimes referred to as sugar sand, which locals liken to quicksand. When we visited the notorious hole, we found ourselves navigating through narrow pineland trails made up of this same treacherous sand. Sure that at any moment our jeep would get hopelessly bogged down, we decided to ditch the vehicle and continue our quest on foot. It was a beautiful autumn day as we wandered the wooded paths of the Winslow Wildlife Management Area. The underbrush was awash with bright cranberry red and golden colored leaves, and the sound of birds chirping filled the sweet-smelling air. As we approached the blue hole though, the atmosphere seemed to change. The birds were heard no more, and in their stead was an eerie silence. The quiet was soon shattered, however, by the echoes of shotgun blasts from a nearby firing range which rang through the tranquil forest. The surface of the blue hole was as still as glass, and a thermometer that we'd brought to measure its temperature read a chilly 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Although the water was crystal clear, we could see no signs of life in the hole whatsoever, no fish, no insects, nothing. There was something unsettling about this void, and suddenly it seemed easy to imagine why people might warn their children not to venture into these waters. Although it might have a bad reputation now, this was not always the case with the blue hole. In the 1930s the site was a popular picnic spot and swimming hole amongst the locals. In the 40s though, a storm washed out a wooden bridge over the nearby Egg Harbor River, cutting off the main access route to the blue hole. Ever since then it has remained isolated in a dense forest of scrub pines, accessible only by foot or off-road vehicle. The blue hole is approximately 130 across, almost perfectly round, and has steep banks. Its waters remain curiously cold, even in the hottest summer months, averaging about 58 degrees. Unlike most bodies of water in the Pine Barrens, which bear a coloration similar to tea due to the high content of iron, tannic acid, and suspended sediment, the water of the blue hole is perfectly clear. There are several theories as to how the blue hole came to be. Some say that it is the result of a meteorite striking the Earth. Others claim that it is what geologists call a pingo. A pingo is a small body of water which is the result of an ice mass which forms beneath permanently frozen soil during an ice age. The ice mass expands for thousands of years, then breaks through the permafrost to create a depression rimmed by a hill. When the climate warms, the ice melts, forming a pool. But what about the fabled whirlpools, or what the locals refer to as whirly pools, which are said to drag down unsuspecting swimmers to their watery graves? How could such a current exist in such a seemingly placid body of water? One explanation for this might be that the blue hole is fed by groundwater, not the nearby stream. This fact accounts for why the water does not contain the same murky color as the river, and might also be the reason for the mysterious surges of current. Scientific rationale does little to lessen the mysteries of this curious body of water though, which seem to run as deep as the blue hole itself. This internet story is only an excerpt of the information we have published on this subject. For the full story we suggest you refer to past issues of Weird New Jersey magazine. Spider Rock. Canyon de Chelly National Monument, located in the northeast corner of the state, is one of Arizona's lesser-known destinations, but one of its most dramatic and inspiring. Though much smaller than the Grand Canyon, visitors often say it can be just as spectacular with its extraordinary ruins and breathtaking features. De Chelly, pronounced de Chelly, or more commonly de Chelly, consists entirely of land owned by the Navajo Nation and still maintains a community of Native Americans who live and farm within the canyon's walls. While sightseers are allowed to explore the chasm's rim freely, visits to nearly all areas within the canyon itself are allowed only with a guide, as many sites are considered sacred to the Navajo people. Notable among those sites is Spider Rock, a red sandstone survivor of epic erosion. An 800-foot spire stabbing the air that flows between the canyon's walls, it stands as a sort of unofficial icon of Canyon de Chelly. It's also the address of the mythical Spider Woman, who has chosen its pinnacle as her home. Spider Woman is considered an important deity in the Navajo culture. According to their creation story, when the Navajo people found their way here from the underworld, she gave power to those who destroyed the evil creatures that roamed this land. In addition, she's been responsible for protecting peaceful men who have found themselves in danger from others. In one story, a young Navajo was hunting in Deshay when an enemy warrior began pursuing him. Chased deeper and deeper into the canyon, the hunter had run out of options until he saw a silk-like cord drop down the side of Spider Rock. He tied it around his waist, and with the help of Spider Woman, the young man escaped to the top, where he was allowed to stay until it was safe. Yet, the legend of Spider Woman does have a darker side. Aided by a spirit snitch who resides on the lower, adjacent peak known as Speaking Rock, Spider Woman seeks out those who have been mischievous and disobedient. Whenever she hears of a child who has been badly behaved, she crawls down from her perch, snatches him up and carries him back to the top to meet his fate. The chalky color that caps Spider Rock is said to be the bones of the Navajo children she has devoured. Travis Walton. It was just past 6 o'clock as Travis Walton and his 6 fellow log cutters finished off a long day of thinning undergrowth in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. The sun had set and darkness was falling quickly, as it tends to do among the tall pines along the Mogollon Rim. With it, an increasing November chill was coming over the men and they anxiously piled into their truck to head for home. It would be at least an hour before they reached Heber to the north, so the men settled into their seats as best they could for the jarring drive up the forest's uneven dirt roads. The smokers in the group hastily lit the first cigarettes they'd had in hours. Walton, one of the only 2 non-smokers on the crew, sat up front in the passenger's seat enjoying the fresh, cool air and watching the pines pass by. Heading up toward Mogollon Rim Road, Walton soon noticed something shining among the branches off to the right. The others saw it, too, and the chatter from the back seat fell quiet. The spaces between the trees flashed by too quickly to make out what the object was, but a clearing up ahead revealed a yellowish glow that washed across the road in front of them. The driver sped up to get a closer look. When they reached the clearing, the men were astonished by what they saw. Less than 100 feet from the edge of the road, a glowing disc hung in the air, floating motionless between the trees, only 15 feet off the ground. The truck slammed to a halt and Walton opened his door to get a better look. There was no sound, save for a startled cry from one of the cutters, "My God! It's a flying saucer." As he recounts in his book Fire in the Sky, Travis Walton then stepped out of the cab and walked toward the object. The others begged him to get back in the truck, but he felt compelled to get a close-up look. He approached the craft cautiously, glancing back to the truck now and then as his friends continued to plead with him. Coming within 6 feet of the craft, Walton stopped and stared up at its glowing underside. Suddenly, the silence along that dark, isolated road gave way to what Walton would later describe as the thunderous swell of a turbine engine. That's when a narrow beam of light fired from the bottom of the disc and struck Walton in the chest. It lifted him up, then knocked him to the ground like a thunderbolt. In a panic, the rest of the crew sped away toward the main road, terrified. When the men regained their senses, they returned to the clearing to rescue their friend. Unfortunately, the craft was gone and so was Walton. Despite a thorough search of the area, they could find no trace of him and were forced to drive home, one crew member short. When they reported what happened, the authorities discounted the men's tale as a ridiculous attempt to cover up a murder and launched an extensive search for Walton's body. They searched for several days and found nothing. Walton reappeared outside Heber 5 days later and corroborated their story, with the addition of what happened aboard the spacecraft. Walton's story, considered the best documented, or at least the most publicized, close encounter ever recorded, details the bizarre events that took place following his abduction on November 5, 1975, including a frightening brush with large-eyed, pale-skinned creatures and his attempted escape inside the alien spacecraft. It's a story that's debated even today, despite the unusual number of eyewitnesses to the initial events and the fact that those witnesses have never strayed from their accounts in more than 30 years. The precise location of the abduction is known to very few, but details from Fire in the Sky lead to a fairly accurate position. South of Heber, the crew followed Mogollon Rim Road about a mile east of Forest Road 87, where they turned north to an area known as Turkey Springs. It was somewhere along this road that the crew allegedly encountered the UFO. Riverside Bridge Monster. Perhaps Tim Burton had heard of this story when he designed the Jack Skellington character for The Nightmare Before Christmas. Charles Wetzel was just trying to get home, but he never bargained for what happened to him on the night of November 8, 1958. As he neared the point where North Main Street crosses the Santa Ana River, he found that the river was overflowing the road and slowed down. Suddenly, he noticed that the radio signal was drowned out by static. Almost simultaneously, something leapt out of the underbrush and landed right in front of his car. It had a round, scarecrowish head, he said, like something out of Halloween. It wasn't human. It had longer arms than anything I'd ever seen. When it saw me in the car, it reached all the way back to the windshield and began clawing me. It didn't have any ears. The face was all round. The eyes were shining like something fluorescent, and it had a protuberant mouth. He later recalled that the thing's legs stuck out sideways from the body and the skin looked scaly, like leaves. As the lanky Hubajib clawed at his windshield and screeched like a fucker, Wetzel reached for a .22 caliber pistol he kept under the seat. Quickly changing his mind about opening the window or shooting through the one thing that separated him from the monster, he floored it. The thing tumbled off the hood to the ground. Not caring what the thing was, or particularly concerned for its safety, Wetzel ran it over. He felt the scraping underneath, and heard more screaming and gurgling from the creature. He hightailed it to the nearest Riverside police station. Officers noted scratches on the hood and windshield, and smears along the oil-covered underside, but returning later to the scene with bloodhounds, they found nothing. The next night, another spook driver reported a similar experience. If anyone else saw the pumpkin-headed ghoul, they kept it to themselves, and the Santa Ana River Basin has been quiet since then, except in the 1970s when Bigfoot-like tracks were discovered nearby. In his book Mysterious America, researcher Lauren Coleman has pointed out the preponderance of weird things associated with place and personal names. Wetzel was high on the list, along with Fayette, Hobbs, and of course, anything associated with the devil. Coleman also discovered that another Charles Wetzel, this one in Nebraska, had seen something that resembled a kangaroo hopping around his farm in July of the same year. While in town, we picked up a free paper calling itself The Brain Tickler of Riverside, which also would be a horrible thing to come across in a dark, flooded road late at night. Main Street Bridge, just north of the 60 freeway, near the 215 and 91 interchange. The bridge was apparently built after 1958, and the area where the monster appeared is now under the south bank side of the structure. Tessie, the monster of Lake Tahoe. The state's largest freshwater lake, Tahoe has long been rumored to be home to both an underwater mob graveyard, and a huge, unknown creature. A story often told around Tahoe is that a few years back, a fisherman trolling off the south shore got his hook caught on something in the deeps. When he finally freed it, and reeled his catch back to his boat, he found a well-preserved human ear on the end of the line. Another version of the tale has the fisherman snagging a three-fingered human hand. According to local legend, the 900-foot deep waters off South Shore served as a dumping place for mob victims from the 20s to the 50s. Hundreds of gangsters' corpses are suspended in the depths, they say, preserved from decay and prevented from gas-bloated surfacing by the near-freezing deep waters. So pervasive is this tale that many local fishermen refer to the area as the graveyard, and a Tahoe boat mafia execution was featured in the climax of The Godfather Part 2. Even stranger are the tales of Tessie. Locals maintain that a large, unidentified, serpent-like creature lives in the deepest parts of the lake, and usually appears around June in even-numbered years. Dubbed Tessie in imitation of Loch Ness Nessie, the beast allegedly appears in Washoe Indian legend, and may have first been spotted by 19th-century settlers. Tessie made headlines in the San Francisco Chronicle on July 12, 1984, when the paper reported that 2 women had seen the Lake Tahoe Leviathan a month earlier. Tahoe City residents Patsy McKay and Diane Stavrakis were hiking above the west shore when they spotted the creature swimming in the lake. McKay said the beast was about 17 feet long. She watched it closely and saw it surface 3 times like a little submarine. Her companion said that the creature had a humpback, and seemed to surface in a whale-like, lethargic manner. She was also sure that it wasn't a diver, a log, or a large ripple. 2 years earlier, a pair of off-duty Reno policemen had also taken a turn with Tessie. Officers Chris Beebe and Jerry Jones were water skiing in the lake in June 1982, when an unusually large creature swam by them. Yet another story about Tahoe asserts that there's an underground river system that links the lake with Pyramid Lake in Nevada. Apparently the bodies of people who have drowned in Tahoe have surfaced in Pyramid Lake, 50 miles to the north. This phenomenon, however, might be due to the corpses floating over the North Tahoe spillway onto the Truckee River, and then downstream to Pyramid Lake. The closest anyone ever came to figuring out Tahoe's mysteries was in the mid-70s. Famed oceanographer Jacques Cousteau brought a mini-submarine to the lake, and did several dives in search of the 1,600-foot bottom. He returned to the surface allegedly saying, "The world isn't ready for what is down there," and to his death refused to release any pictures or data from the expedition. What did the legendary diver find? Pinstripe-suited, bullet-riddled corpses bobbing in the dark depths? A colony of living, amphibian dinosaurs? Or something even weirder? The answers lie in the chilly depths of Blue Lake Tahoe. Maybe this will entertain you. It is similar to the story of the Pig Lady, but is in Texas, the legend of the Donkey Lady. I started elementary school in 1966 at Westwood Terrace in San Antonio, Texas. While I was there, I heard many local legends. Later I found that anyone who had gone to school in San Antonio had heard of the Donkey Lady. Now the way I heard it, back in the 50s, a young woman had been in a fire. My wife says she heard the Donkey Lady had lost 2 children in that fire and that her husband had started it. She was left horribly disfigured. It was said that when her face healed, all the skin had something of a drooped, baggy appearance. Her fingers had all fused together, leaving dark stumps, or hooves. Disfigured and totally insane, she stayed mostly in the rural areas of Behar, pronounced Bear, County and terrorized anyone who approached her. As children, when we could stay out late on summer nights, we would all describe what we thought she looked like. We were absolutely positive she waited in the darkness for us to separate so she could pounce on a lone victim, ripping and chewing. Well, you get the idea. Most of the Donkey Lady stories have faded into memory, but one was a little harder to shake. One of best my friends told of a cousin who was with his father and brother on a weekend outing. They were going to camp and do a little fishing in an unofficial county park. The group pulled up to a weed-infested area off a dirt road and began to make camp. The 2 boys had the task of unloading the pickup truck while the father found a suitable spot for the tent. While unloading the truck, one of the boys heard a rustling in the weeds just ahead of the truck. He told his brother, who in turn called out to their father to come to the truck. The 3 of them watched the tall weeds beneath the oaks away from the road bend under the weight of what was apparently a large animal. Then they heard an odd snorting sound and a high-pitched snarl. The father, not recognizing the sounds coming from the animal, decided they probably ought to find another spot to set up camp. The 3 of them quickly threw the tent, sleeping bags, and gear into the back of their truck. While packing up, the father watched out of the corner of his eye, as the weeds shook nearby. The prowler moved away from the trees and began heading for the general area of the road. The father urgently whispered for the boys to get in the truck, fast. All 3 of them were in the truck in a flash and the father started it up. He put the truck in gear and was just pulling out in the road when something fast and large burst out of the weeds and ran at the front of the truck. Seconds later, a horrible apparition bounded up onto their hood and began shrieking at them through the glass. It was the ugliest thing any of them ever saw. They swore it looked like a donkey, but it was mostly human. It screamed at them more as the truck continued to move away from the weeds and into the road. It used its deformed hands to punch at the windshield and broke it in many places. The father hit the brakes. The thing slid off the hood and onto the dirt road. Throwing the truck into reverse, the father floored the gas pedal and put some distance between them and the thing backing into the weeds off the road. He then put the truck into first and stepped on it again. That thing was coming up on them fast. They said it almost looked like a wild animal with an incredible look of rage and hatred in its eyes. Dirt sprayed up from the road at the beast as they pulled out, slowing it down just enough for them to get away. The donkey lady supposedly had finally dropped back and headed into the weeds. After the story was told, and my friend let it be known that he thought it was a nice story, but, well, it was a nice story. Then he was taken outside and shown the truck. The windshield was almost knocked out. The hood was dented and its paint was scuffed and scraped. Occurrence at Donkey Lady Bridge. The Donkey Lady Bridge is the bridge that crosses Elm Creek via Applewhite Road, approximately 4 miles north of Loop 1604 on the south side of San Antonio. The tales that I have on the Donkey Lady are not directly related to me, however they were relayed to me through friends in high school. These are people I have known all my life, and have no reason not to believe them. One night in late 1987, while at my best friend's house, 4 fellow companions showed up. Bored and looking for something to do, we suggested they visit the Donkey Lady Bridge. This locale was only a short drive from the house. They agreed and were soon driving out of sight. About 6 hours later their vehicle returned to our driveway with only one occupant. Assuming he had taken the girls home and was ready to party in San Antonio, we went out anxious to greet him. What we found at the car was something I'll never forget. The windshield was busted, the front dented, and there was what appeared to be blood all over the hood. We immediately ran to the driver's door to see if John, not his actual name, was all right. He was just sitting there staring out the windshield with a blank expression on his face. After several minutes of consistent badgering, we finally got him to talk. He told us that he and his friends Lisa, Terry, and Jill had arrived at the bridge. They began to honk their horn and call for the Donkey Lady. According to legend, this is how you are supposed to get her attention. After about 15 minutes of not seeing anything, they decided to go into the woods and look for her themselves. What happened next was truly unbelievable, and if I hadn't known John all my life and seen the car, I would not have believed it myself. While walking in the woods, John said he got the feeling they were being watched. He immediately stopped and told everyone to be quiet. Looking around and evaluating the situation, he discovered in the distance what appeared to be 2 eyes staring at them. These eyes seemed to be reflecting from the moonlight and were of a color that he said was indescribable. The girls immediately panicked and began to run back to the car. John was quick to follow, and soon after he turned away there was a horrible scream from the direction of the eyes. He described it as almost being a cry from an intelligent animal. Too afraid to turn around, he picked up his pace as he ran to the car. When he got there, the girls were already inside screaming at him to get in and leave. As he was trying to find his keys, he was heard the sounds of what seemed to be a horse running in their direction. Starting the car, he slammed it into gear and put the pedal to the floor. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the road in front of them. Too afraid to stop, John collided with the figure. It hit the hood of the car and rolled over the roof. Looking in his rear view mirror, he said he thought the figure got up and continued to pursue them. After hearing this and seeing the condition of the car, my friend and I felt this deserved a second look. John told us that he would never return to that bridge again, but if we wanted to risk our lives, to go right ahead. Grabbing 2 flashlights and a pair of shotguns, that was the biggest weapon Steve's father had, we jumped in my pickup and made way for the bridge. As we drew closer, we slowed down, and turned on the many off-road lights my truck had. These lit the road and the woods to the side of us as if it were daytime, giving us an outstanding view of the bridge as we approached. The first thing we noticed as the bridge drew close was the large amount of blood on the road. However, this was the only of evidence we could find of the incident described by John. Upon our investigation of the woods on foot, we discovered what seemed to be several tracks of a small horse, unshod, leading to the road. After several hours of looking and not finding anything else, we returned to the house. By this time John had already found his way home, and we laid in bed, too excited to sleep. To this day, none of the people involved in this story have returned to the bridge. Did John actually see and strike the donkey lady that night, or was it merely a stray pony startled by their presence? All I know is that something was there that night and it did scare our friends half to death. Attacked at Donkey Lady Bridge. I had an incident similar to the one Airborne submitted. One weekend in 1989 some friends and I were driving around in the 1973 Impala one of them owned, as we usually did. We were showing the younger cousins of the driver, Todd, around. They had turned 13 that year and were being inducted. We decided to drive to Donkey Lady Bridge, partly since we had never been there, partly to give them a good scare. Any child, particularly the south/southeast side ones, that have grown up in San Antonio knows about the Donkey Lady. There was even a phone number you could call to hear her. So they laughed and agreed to the idea. We drove out to the bridge, turning off the headlights before we were actually on it. It is very eerie out there at night. It was much more because of the almost full moon barely lighting the bridge. Todd started to slowly advance across the bridge, when a figure appeared seemingly from nowhere in the middle of it. He stopped the car and we whispered speculations as to who or what it was. We were not expecting to see anything, much less this. Todd placed the car in gear again, and honking his horn, slowly inched his way toward the figure, which promptly vanished. The car was stopped again, and this made us shut up. Todd sat listening to our suggestions to back up or gun the car to the other side when something landed on the hood of the car. Everyone screamed, and Todd slammed the car into reverse and floored it. The dark figure rolled from the hood, and Todd didn't stop until we had reached the main road and made our way to the Denny's on Southwest Military near International Highway 10. Getting out, we all stared at the hood, which now sported two very deep dents in it. No one had an explanation of just where the figure had dropped from to make those. We went inside to eat, but just decided to call it a night. Todd took his car to a body shop the next day, and had to replace the entire hood. The dents were too deep to pound out. Incidentally, I was 17 when this happened, and am 30 today, and I have never been back out there. Demon's Road. There is a spooky, isolated back road in Huntsville that winds past lonely meadows and dark, wooded groves. Its real name is Bowden Road, but some locals call it by another, more sinister moniker, Demon's Road. People are wary of traveling this road after dark, for many stories persist of the things that haunt Demon's Road, things such as the faceless creature that's supposedly been seen lurking in the woods alongside the byway. Claims of mysterious handprints being left all over the outside of a car by the time it reaches the end of the road are not uncommon. There are stories of strange apparitions and ghostly lights floating across the open meadows and fields around the road, and more. Some have claimed to have seen and, in some cases, even been chased down the road by an unearthly-looking hooded figure. Without a doubt, this is one road with a diabolical reputation. We drove down its dusty length in the last minutes just before dusk. The shadows grew longer around every curve, and even in the fading daylight the road had an air of menace. It's very isolated, and very long, and we can only imagine it would be quite a wild, scary ride in the dead of night, when the unknown are said to roam and stake their claim on Demon's Road. Screaming Bridge. They say it happened one dark night as a carload of excited teenagers were returning home from a high school football game, driving down an old country road just outside of Arlington's River Legacy Park. The kids were excited and distracted as they approached the narrow little bridge that ran across the Trinity River, and they did not see the car coming at them on the bridge from the other direction until it was too late to avoid disaster. There was a terrible head-on collision, with both vehicles exploding violently and plummeting off of the bridge and into the waters below. There were no survivors. Since then, they have called it the Screaming Bridge. The road that it is on has long been closed off, and the only way of reaching it is on foot through the park. Local lore states that if you can find the Screaming Bridge and look into the water from its vantage, you will see eerie glowing tombstones in the water, one for each of the dead, with names and the date of the accident visible on each. They also say that if you dare to sit in the middle of the Screaming Bridge on the anniversary of the night the deadly accident occurred, at midnight a thick fog will rise up from the river and you can see phantom headlights speeding at each other from either end of the bridge, as the tragic events of that fateful night replay themselves to their violent conclusion. Even though every single person we asked about the Screaming Bridge seemed to know about the legend, nobody knew exactly how to get there. It was almost as if Screaming Bridge didn't want to be found. But a park ranger did confirm its existence and that the road that led to it had long ago been closed down. A lot of haunted bridges, et. Legend of the Converse werewolf. Dear Weird Texas, I have not seen anything on your site about werewolves, which are a real interest of mine. This is because I have lived all of my life, except for 4 years away at college in Oregon, in Behar County, Texas. And we have one doozy of a legend around here. Let me tell you what I have heard about the Converse werewolf. This is old-time ranching country. And part of being a rancher, especially back then, was being manly. One rancher wanted his son to go out and be a man, so he sent the 15-year-old out into the wilderness by himself, and told him to bring home a deer for the family to eat. The boy went out, and days later, still hadn't returned. The rancher summoned all of his neighbors and they went on a search party. The rancher was out looking and heard a noise off in the woods. He went running in that direction, thinking he had found his son, and he was right, but he got more than he bargained for. What he saw was an 8-foot-tall creature that looked like a direct cross between a wolf and a gorilla. And it was eating his 15-year-old boy. The rancher shot at the beast and it took off into the woods, but it was too late, the kid had been eaten to death. The rancher plunged into a deep depression, and generally went off the deep end. He stopped talking to people, stopped eating, and died shortly after seeing that gruesome sight. Big Chuck Hawley. Abandoned and haunted, the Parkland/Woodlawn Hospital of Dallas. An abandoned old hospital is the perfect place for a haunting, and Parkland Hospital in Dallas is said to have a few. Originally, an old clapboard hospital opened on this site in 1894, and was replaced by the current building in 1913. It became known as Parkland due to the fact that it was built on beautiful, sprawling grounds called Oak Lawn, which the city of Dallas used as a park. The place was enlarged in the 20s and again in the 30s, including the addition of a nurse's dormitory. It became famous for its intricate brick architecture, Greek Revival entrance, and lush park-like setting. In 1954, in response to a need for more space, a new Parkland Hospital was constructed near the old facility, which was then renamed Woodlawn. The new Parkland became the main hospital, and, incidentally, was the hospital where they took JFK after he was shot. Woodlawn was used to treat patients with chronic diseases, tuberculosis, and psychiatric problems. It was closed permanently as a healthcare facility in 1974, and its ownership transferred to Dallas County. At different times it housed a rape crisis center, the Dallas County Fire Marshal, a law enforcement academy, an alcoholic rehabilitation center, and a minimum security prison. So, as you can see, this place has a lot of history. It's not surprising that people claim the place could be haunted. There have been reports of strange noises, voices, and lights inside the hospital at night, and even apparitions. The most famous one is the specter of a little girl whom they say fell out of a tree and died on the grounds. Supposedly she will appear near a tree and say, "You're too late to help." Then she vanishes with a scream. When we visited the forlorn old hospital, we were amazed when we first laid eyes on it. It's an incredible complex, the brickwork is gorgeous, and the style of the architecture is really beautiful. We could see right away there would be no getting inside the place though, it was all tightly boarded up. We parked on the right side of the hospital and started our stroll there, heading around toward the front. There was a huge, brilliant green expanse of lawn dotted with lush trees all across the front of the place. Someone obviously keeps it up as the grounds looked impeccable. One weird thing was how some boxes up on a second-floor balcony contrasted behind the iron scrollwork made the appearance of a pair of eyes looking down at us from the building's face. The place was huge. It took us a few minutes just to wander all the way across the front lawn. As we rounded the corner toward the left side of the building, we found what appeared to be the emergency entrance, and another entrance that had a faded sign reading clinic above its doors. There was another long expanse of green lawn along the side of the building too, studded with trees, one of which stood out because of its height and extremely dark bark. We wondered if this could be the tree where the ghost of the poor dead girl was said to make her presence known. We lingered under its branches for a few minutes, but nothing spectral appeared to us. Heading on around to the back of the hospital, we found a building marked boiler room with a huge smokestack jutting into the sky, the jail entrance and many other buildings that may have been dormitories or patients' quarters or part of the jail or clinic. The place was so big that it took us about half an hour to walk all the way around the whole thing. I really wish we could have gone in though. We can only imagine what must lie inside. We did recently read the following in a Dallas publication concerning the potential future of the abandoned hospital. ASLA Dallas will work in partnership with the Dallas chapter of the American Institute of Architects, AIA, to restore the abandoned Parkland Hospital and turn it into the first of its kind health education facility for the citizens of Dallas. So, maybe the old place is gonna get new life again sometime soon. We can only hope that the new facility will set aside a little space for the residents of the former institution who have never checked out. Bexar County Hospital's Angel of Death. Growing up in San Antonio, I have heard and seen some pretty weird stuff. There are the haunted railroad tracks near Espada Park, Donkey Lady Road, Midget Mansion, ghosts of the Alamo, haunting of the Gunther Hotel, specters in Millam Square and many other oddities. It seems that San Antonio is the grand avenue of strange occurrences. A few not-so-known incidences are those of local businesses that do not want their strange events known. It would hurt their reputation. One of which is the formerly known Bexar County Hospital. My sister worked on the oncology ward as a medical clerk. She would come home and tell us stories of the lady in white making her way down the hall performing her own Dr. Kevorkian rituals. There was a rash of deaths taking place on the ward and it was going from room to room in order down the hall. Now while it seems that it would be common to have deaths on this type of ward, the fact that it was progressing in order according to room number was what was bringing it to the staff's attention. Several patients before meeting their demise would ask who the nurse in the old-time uniform was that was coming in their room in the wee hours of the morning. Many patients had video and diagnostic monitors on them with displays at the central nurses' station. Nurses could quickly review the status of patients' stats so as not to disturb them during the night. But abnormal things started to happen. Patients would be seen talking or holding their hands out to someone not seen on the monitor. Privacy curtains would suddenly close around the bed, obstructing the camera's view. One nurse had to repeatedly replace a tracheotomy tube that kept popping out of a patient's neck. They watched the monitor to see if the patient was doing this himself and were startled to see it come out, seemingly of its own accord. When they started watching the monitors more closely, the staff caught glimpses of a white figure moving around patients' beds. The strange death stopped when one patient died and the next room that would be in the progression was vacant. A patient's room across the hall was experiencing problems with the electrical wiring and it was suggested that they move her into the vacant room, but staff members did everything they could to relocate her to another area. That is when management asked what was going on. The staff was told to keep quiet about their suspicions and that people would get fired if it leaked out. Several staff members, including my sister, soon turned in their resignations. Bloody Bucket Road. Bloody Bucket Road isn't the real name of this sinister road in Wauchula, but that's what everybody calls it because of allegations of what happened there many years ago. There is also a bridge called Bloody Bucket Bridge that is connected to the story of this road, but whether or not any of the legend is factual or fiction is hard to determine. His paved road runs south off of Main Street in Wauchula and in the daytime doesn't really look all that threatening, but drive farther down this road and cross the bridge and things start looking a little different, at least in the moonlight. If you keep going you will eventually come out on Route 64 that runs between Zolfo Springs and Avon Park. The road was once a dirt road called Reinhardt or Reinhardt Pass Road, and is said to be 100 years old, which is a fact since it can be found on pre-1900 old maps. Now you have the facts, but the rest of the story comes from locals who profess to have some knowledge about how the road got its creepy name. Many years ago an ex-slave woman came down from Georgia with her husband and settled in Wauchula. She served as the midwife for the community and allegedly had delivered several hundred babies. Being concerned that some families already had too many children to feed, the woman decided to help out by eliminating a few right after birth. She would smother the babies and take them down to the bridge and bury them in the woods along the river. People became suspicious after so many babies had died while being delivered by her. Some said that she was deranged because she could not have children of her own or that her children had been taken from her while she was a slave. After people refused to allow her to deliver any more babies, the woman went crazy. Then the souls of the babies came back to haunt her. It is claimed that she could sit beside a bucket and it would fill with the blood of all the infants she had killed. She would empty the bucket and it would fill with blood again. She wore herself out carrying the blood-filled buckets to the bridge where she would empty them in the river. One day while emptying a bloody bucket in the river, the old woman fell in and drowned. For several days following her demise the river ran red with blood. That is how the bridge became Bloody Bucket Bridge, and I suppose the name carried over to the road. How much of the story is true is hard to determine, however there is some evidence that it might have been promoted in a Halloween story by an amateur writer in Wauchula. Whether the writer made up the story or used an existing yarn is not known, but it certainly created momentum for a legend. Bridge over bloody water. There's a bridge in Wauchula called Bloody Bucket Bridge, and if you go there at certain times and look at the river water it will be red like blood. This happens only when the moon is full and you have to go there at night because in the daytime you can't see it. We went there just to see if it was true, and yes, the water did look red. We shined a flashlight down there on the water and it was as red as blood. My friend said it was because of the tannic acid from tree roots that grow along the river, but I don't think so. It is much too red for tannic acid. There is a story about people pouring blood in the river, but I don't know if it was human or cow or some other blood. Cries from the Blood Bucket Woods. On Halloween night in 2003 we parked near the canoe launching place by the bridge and walked down that road called Bloody Bucket after hearing about the legend just to see if we could see anything. I was with my friend and 2 other people. It is really a scary place and I don't advise anybody with a faint heart to go down there at night. There are sounds that come out of the woods by the river that sound like children crying. There is a story that a woman killed her babies and buried them in the woods right where we heard the sounds. We stood very still and tried to listen to the sounds to see if we could make them out. One of the guys said it could be birds roosting in the trees, but the rest of us did not think so. It sounded too much like crying. As we were standing there, something ran out of the woods and crossed the road. It scared the crap out of us. We literally ran back to the car and got out of there. There is something real strange on that road. You can go check it yourself. Legend of the Faceless People of Monroe, Connecticut. In the tiny town of Monroe in Fairfield County, Connecticut, there is a desolate old barn in the woods that has been boarded up long ago. There is no paved road leading to the barn, and the dirt road that does exist is covered with gnarled tree trunks and roots. Yet if you were to hike through the woods you might hear strange voices coming from inside the barn, sounds like they might belong to otherworldly beings. If you arrive at nightfall you will see a glimpse of light behind a crack between the boards that cover the windows. No shadows can be made out, nothing human, anyways. What lurks within the solid walls of this two-story barn that lacks a fresh coat of paint? Called by the locals the House of the Faceless People, legend has it that a group of unfortunates live in this old barn with one caretaker who is never seen leaving or entering it. Presumably the caretaker goes out only at midnight with his charges so that they can at least get some fresh air. The sunlight is not favorable to these individuals who have no face, they have no eyes, nose, or ears, just a mouth outlined with pale lips, and bony hands grasping around constantly as if trying to find their way in the world. Curiosity seekers who are clever enough to locate the old barn are usually chased away by the caretaker. Yet there have been reports in Monroe of the occasional faceless person who decided to take a stroll through the woods and make his way to the main road when the caretaker was not looking. The unfortunate would unintentionally frighten a citizen on the way to the grocery store or bank, darting out in front of the car only to have the driver startled, thinking a wild animal was in the way. The caretaker of the Faceless People remains apart from the community, most likely to maintain the privacy of himself and his special family. Even the Faceless People of this house deserve respect, too, accepted by society or not. While many questions remain about these people, especially where they came from and how they came to be faceless, the barn remains impenetrable to all who pass it, daring to walk up close to the building, if only to scared away by the caretaker. To date, none of the Faceless People have ever been caught on camera, but perhaps that is due to the fact they are clever enough to move quickly away from the rest of the town of Monroe. The Devil's Road and the Cult House. There's a wood in southeastern Pennsylvania, right on the Delaware border, whose legendary status has even made it into a summer blockbuster movie. True, the movie in question, The Village, was written and directed by a local boy, M. Night Shyamalan. But when an A-list Hollywood director brings a wood full of misshapen trees into the Cineplex, you know the legend has legs. The Devil's Road winds a couple of miles through the woods just north of the Delaware border in Chadds Ford. It is better known to map readers as Cosset Road, and has enjoyed a reputation for its general aura of evil for decades. It's particularly famous in the triangle of towns between Wilmington, Philadelphia, and Coatesville. But although the exact location is often misreported as somewhere in northern Delaware, all the stories agree on one point: the trees that line this narrow, winding avenue bend away from the pavement as if recoiling from something unspeakable. Further into the woods, they say, up a densely wooded hillside, stands a massive stone mansion known as the Cult House, which Delaware residents insist was once owned by a member of the DuPont family. The Cult House naturally housed a cult of some kind, as the story goes, but the nature of its ceremonies remains vague even by the standards of the local rumor mill. Fans of plutocratic conspiracy theories spin wild stories of DuPont family members marrying their cousins in the house, so that the family's wealth would stay in the family, and then using the place to hide any inbred spawn these unnatural unions produced. The less fanciful rumors fall back on the old favorites, Satanists and the Ku Klux Klan. The house's windows are said be cross-shaped, or among the camp that believes in the Satanist rumors, inverted cross-shaped. But it's getting harder and harder to explore the Devil's Road. For one thing, the street signs have been removed from Kennett Pike, so it's easy to miss the Cosset Road turn, or to mistakenly turn into a private road called Cosset Manor Drive a few miles up the pike. Even if you find the road, you'll find it liberally posted with no stopping and no trespassing signs on the trees. The legend of the road has been repeated so often in the past 40 years that literally hundreds of noisy explorers would belt up the road by night, disturbing the residents, spray painting everything in sight, and driving recklessly. The usual obnoxious behavior was bad enough, but it escalated into vandalism and dangerous stunts such as cross-burning, that forced the township and police into a strong reaction. A barricade went up with no trespassing signs and threats of heavy fines. Police and private security guards began regular patrols along the lane, which probably accounts for the many tales of visitors being chased down the road. So we'd advise people to tread with caution when they think about treading down the darkness of the Devil's Road. Don't pull over on the dark and winding road, unless you want to get rear-ended by some other thrill seekers or ticketed for parking in a no-stopping zone. And certainly don't start tramping through private property if your fear of being arrested is greater than your fear of mysterious places. After all, you can always get a good look at the woods in the village instead of in real life. Cult house. When I was in high school, there was one particularly prevalent story about a mansion located in the woods of the Brandywine Valley. This house was actually just north of the PA border. Everyone called it Cult House. Now, I'm not sure how this rumor started. I do know that some of my friends' fathers could remember the same story, involving the same location being told when they were in high school. According to local legend, this mansion is supposedly owned and operated by a satanic cult. In some versions, the cult is associated with a prominent Delaware family involved in the chemical industry. The window panes are in the shape of inverted crosses. The trees that line the road running along the side of the house grow at a very distinct angle away from the house, in some areas away from their main light source. Most interestingly, there is a guardhouse on the grounds that houses a fleet of red pickup trucks. If you drive past the house too often, one or several of the trucks will come out of the house and chase you away. No matter how close it gets, you will never be able to catch a glimpse of the driver's face. There is one particular tree along the road that runs past the house that has exposed roots. The roots form the perfect shape of a human skull. It is said that years ago, police found the remains of a sacrificial victim nestled inside the tree. Reports conflict on whether the victim was human or animal. According to the legend, a human sacrifice is performed on the grounds every Halloween. Well, that's the rumor. Here is my personal experience with Cult House. I have been occasionally driving by the place with friends and researching its history for about 7 years now. The window panes actually are in the shape of inverted crosses. This seems to be not necessarily intentional, it may just be how those particular panes are shaped. The trees do grow at an extreme angle away from the house. I've never seen trees grow so off-kilter before. In some places they do seem to grow away from the main light source. This phenomena stops once you get about a quarter of a mile past the house. There is a guardhouse and there are red trucks. They have actually followed me before on 2 occasions. The first was at night, and the truck's lights were off. This is amazing, because there are no street lights, and the trees allow in no moonlight. I couldn't understand how the driver was able to even stay on the road. I was behind it at first. The truck pulled over and waited for me to pass. It then pulled out and followed me until I was several miles from the house. I had one passenger in the car, and you can imagine the state we were in. We were scared to death, but really excited. The next time was also at night, but with a different friend. After we had driven past the guardhouse several times, we noticed that we were being followed by a red truck. We hadn't seen it even come onto the road. We never saw the driver's face. Again, we were followed until we were several miles from the house, then the truck just pulled over to the side of the road. Again, the headlights were off. I have never seen anyone entering or exiting the main house or the guardhouse. I know the trucks are housed at the guardhouse, because at least 5 are usually visible in the driveway. The skull tree does look frighteningly like a human skull. I have never found any newspaper accounts confirming that remains of any kind were found in the tree. I have been able to find absolutely no evidence of sacrificial rites being performed during Halloween or at other times, according to local records. I have also, up to this point, been unsuccessful in trying to dig up deeds, or any type of records of transfers for the property. Dina Haber. On Bended Tree. There is a legend about a road nicknamed Devil's Road, located off of Route 202 by Concord Pike. As rumor has it, there is a house or church used to perform satanic rituals and such. At the beginning of the road, there are 2 arrow-shaped pickets known to many as the Gates of Hell. On this road, the trees are bent away from the church, and there are many trees spray painted with the number 666, and many other disturbing words and images. There is a gate to the side of the road, and off that road behind the gate is the church. I have been on this road many times, and the only strange thing I saw was on mischief night, the night before Halloween, when myself and my friends saw shadowy, orange lights lighting up the house. I am pretty sure that it was candlelight, but we did not want to make any assumptions. Devil worship and dead animals. Driving down the road toward the mansion, we noticed a pile of dead animals, mostly raccoons, slit from throat to genitals and completely gutted. It was like there was just a frame of the animal left. When we finally approached the mansion, I was even more disgusted. Hanging from the black iron gate were more carcasses like the ones we'd just seen. It's also said that if you go at night, you can hear the satanic worshipping that goes on inside, word for word. Fortunately, we were there during the day. Brook Meadows. Chased by Satan on his very own road. Satan Road, as it is affectionately known, is a condemned road off Route 100 in Delaware. Its entrance is easy to miss, despite the bright orange warning signs, because of the way 100 bends and because of the overgrowth of the area. The state has attempted to blockade the road with signs that threaten a $1,000 penalty to trespassers, but this has not stopped nosy teens. The entryway and most of the first half of the road is so overgrown with trees and vines that it resembles a tunnel. Once you start down the road, there is no turning back. It is very windy, and despite being a 2-lane road is uncomfortably narrow for even a single car. About halfway down the road you come around one of the bends and you see it plain as day and indisputable, the cult house. All the trees near it grow up a few feet, then they all turn at an angle so sharp that they are almost parallel to the ground, always away from the house. It's not just 2 or 3 trees, it's every tree for several hundred feet. To the right of the road is a wall of rock covered in pentagrams. The house itself sits back from the road and very few have the nerve to walk up to it. The Satan worshippers wait for your arrival at the entrance to the road in a black SUV. As soon as you start to slow down and turn, they turn on their headlights, pop out from hiding, and chase you out to a bridge on Route 100. I myself have been chased once by the SUV and have seen some sort of eerie bright blue flash when we were about to enter the road that scared us enough to not even bother with the road that night. Run when you see the whites of their eyes. I hail from the great town of Brummel, Pennsylvania, Delaware County. If anyone has written from my area, it's probably been about Satanville. Located just off of Route 1 just past Concordville and just before the Brandywine Civil War Museum. All my life I've heard the stories about the place. Sometimes called Hell's House, it is actually an old church in the middle of a field, not easily accessible. You go down this road where the trees bend completely away from the road. Legend has it that the devil, in a fit of rage, let out a ear-piercing scream down the road one night, and from that point on the trees have grown away from it. Furthermore, down this road is Skull Tree. A tree that looks like, well, a large human skull. Now comes the tricky part, finding the church. We followed the road around for at least 2 hours until we found a gate leading back to the church. Of course, the road is completely littered with KKK and devil worshipper graffiti. The gate was secured with a fresh padlock, and the path leading back to the church was extremely overgrown, thus my Bronco would not have fit. You definitely need a Jeep or just to go on foot. Just around the time of finding the gate, a car passed us. The drivers' faces were completely white with dark hair, sporting the Gothic look. Their eyes were also white. Like perhaps they were rolled up all the way. Needless to say, we were out of there like a bat out of hell. Numerous people, including close friends, have been there. Usually you get chased away by black pickup trucks or black Broncos that chase you to the exit before veering off. Tuning into Satan's signal. I've heard a story about a Bible inside a black church on Devil's Road. It won't let you take it out, because it gets too heavy. I've also heard that there's a certain radio station that plays music that they play in the background during their rituals. I heard the station once. It was faint and hard to pick up. Some say they broadcast it on only a powerful enough signal so the worshippers hear it and go to meet up. Dan A. Chased off of Devil's Road. I have been on Devil's Road numerous times, at least 100. I have been up to the Devil's house. The roof is lined with metal crows all facing in the same direction, and there is a white cement bench in the front yard with a demon's face perfectly carved on it. People really do chase you out of there. I remember one time around 2 p.m., I was driving with one of my friends on Devil's Road and a black SUV sped up behind us, then turned into the woods. There was no dirt road or anything. It just turned right into the woods. Then the next thing I knew, he was coming full speed right towards us. One time when there was a full moon, I could see a fire and the outlines of about 12 to 15 people standing in a circle around it. Then I got chased off by 2 Bronco SUVs. Beyond the Pale, the albino cannibals of Ghost Mountain. Tales of strange people bonded together in self-policing communities are common throughout the states, and indeed, throughout the world. Pennsylvania is no exception. These communities can include anybody out of the ordinary, but the particular favorite candidates for such campfire scare stories are albinos. There's nothing like a lack of pigmentation to send the overactive imagination into a tailspin. Pale skin and pale blue or red eyes are the stuff of vampires, and indeed, some believe that the albino's discomfort with bright light may have led to many of the tales of night-walking bloodsuckers. But if any communities of albinos do exist in the mountains of Pennsylvania, let's inject a sense of civility into the proceedings here. Driving around people's homes by night with the intention of disturbing them is a form of persecution. Let's treat these stories as what they are, good fun, and not a call to single out any group for unpleasant treatment. Child stealing, rock salt shooting, circus escaping, inbreeding clan. Every rural area in the country seems to be inhabited by a reclusive band of albinos. We here in Sellersville, PA, have our own. These cannibalistic, child stealing, rock salt shooting, circus escaping, inbreeding clan of albinos are said to live high up in the woods on Haycock Mountain and were the stuff of legend in my childhood. They're said to waylay unwary travelers and eat them. They supposedly sometimes raid local farms for livestock and leave gruesome evidence behind. Local police know of their existence and are scared to go up the mountain. They live in a huge concrete house with no windows, and throw firecrackers at passing cars in the middle of the night. They hide in trees and drop down onto unsuspecting hikers, dragging them away to become dinner for the rest of the clan. They block back roads and perform unspeakable rites on moonlit nights. They cavort like fairies amongst the trees, frightening passers-by with their unnatural complexion. Sightings of them flitting from tree to tree and being mistaken for errant specters even supposedly gave one local road its name, Ghost Mountain Road. My own investigations into this have turned up plenty of stories and supposed eyewitness accounts, with some proof in the form of rock salt residue blasted into the cheap paint jobs of local high schoolers' Camaros. But, of the albinos themselves, not a trace. Although I did find 2 abandoned houses, one with all the bathtubs and sinks filled with a mixture of mud, leaves, and what may once have been water. A search of local newspaper archives has revealed a depressing lack of corroborating evidence here. But hey, not all the news gets reported, you know. There's a place we call Ghost Mountain, actually Haycock Mountain, near an old covered bridge where local legend has it that someone had hanged himself. It's also said that if you turn your car on and off 3 times, your car will cease to start. You can really get a sense of bad vibes around that area. There is a house near there where albinos live. The story with them is that if you dare go on their property they will chase you away with a shotgun in hand. A couple of my friends found this out to be true. Melissa. The albino house. I never saw the actual albinos myself, but did see the house. It's pretty strange. You have to go down a dirt road and just before you reach a cool old-timey red covered bridge. On the way to the place down the bumpy dirt road are little doors in the side of a hill, strange tunnel complexes, hobbit holes, and other freaky stuff. It turns out they are really root cellars, but who the hell knows what a root cellar is anymore? Marco. There is a place where I like to take my friends to that are new to the ghost scene. It's called Ghost Mountain and it is in Bucksco, past Palisades High School. It's a pretty cool place. It's a dirt road and once you turn onto the road you see this in which sometimes you can see an elderly lady upstairs knitting. But the great thing about her is you can see right through her. Across the road from the house there is a wine cellar that goes into the side of the hill. Each of my friends have different stories of what they have seen when they've opened it. The different stories are that they see a huge dark shadow standing right there when they open it. The shadow was sitting in a chair with his head down. There is the covered bridge. Go over the bridge, turn your car off, beep the horn 3 times, turn your headlights on and you are supposed to see a man hanging there. I've only seen it once. Genially. For more on Ghost Mountain and Pennsylvania's many other fabled people and places see Weird Pennsylvania. I am done for one day, keep it spoopy my friends, until next time. As usual, if anyone has any creepy stories or things of the sort of nature that gets posted in these threads, be sure to post away.